Chapter 136, The Stumped Klein.
This can't be right. How could Mr. Azek be the first in the so-called line of barons, Baron Lamud? This is a figure who lived 14 or 1500 years ago. No way. How can I be sure that the person in the portrait is the first Baron Lamud?
Klein looked at the oil painting, his mind buzzing in confusion. It was like everyone around him had become monsters or a dream where the entire world was filled with gods. He looked up and stared at the blond, middle-aged man. He extended his hand to grab his revolver from his underarm holster and said in a deep voice,
This is not an antique. If you don't clarify the situation, I will arrest you and charge you with fraud.
He didn't care if prosecution fell under the police department. His only goal was to threaten the man to get information. At the same time, Klein clicked his left molars 2 times to activate his spirit vision. Then, he looked at his target's emotional color changes. The blond man jumped in fright and said in a panicked, muffled voice,
No, I'm not sure if it's an antique either. No, I heard that it's an antique, but I don't know much about such things. I really have no idea. I don't even know many words.
His eyes darted around anxiously, seemingly about to cry for help. Just then, he saw Klein adjust his revolver's cylinder and hammer. He looked as though he was going to shoot a suspect that resisted. He suddenly stood straight and stopped looking around.
Where did you get the oil painting?
Klein asked heavily. The blond man's lips quivered as he said with a fawning smile,
Officer, this is what my grandfather found in the ancient castle, more than 40 years ago. An outer wall in the room on the 2nd floor collapsed, revealing these items that people couldn't find in the past. One of them was the oil painting. No, not this oil painting. The original oil painting was torn and couldn't be preserved, so my grandfather found someone to make a copy of the painting. The one you saw just now, I didn't lie to you. An oil painting from 40 years ago could really be considered as an antique.
Are you sure that this is the portrait of the first Baron Lamud?
Klein stroked the trigger and made sure the man's gaze didn't move an inch. The blond man chuckled and said,
I'm not sure, but I'm guessing so.
Reason?
Klein nearly laughed at the man's shamelessness.
Because there wasn't any labels on the oil painting.
The blond man replied seriously for once.
Just like I'm called the scoundrel gray, my father is called the curly-haired gray, and only my grandfather was the real gray.
Klein exhaled silently and asked,
Where's your grandfather?
In the cemetery, he's been buried there for almost 2 decades. Next to him is my father, who was buried 3 years back.
The blond man answered honestly. After Klein asked a few questions from different angles, he adjusted the cylinder in front of the blond man and put it back into his underarm holster. He put away his police identification and turned around in his black trench coat before walking towards the motel with his hands stuffed into his pockets. He walked quietly along the street underneath the dim light that was shining out from the houses that lined both sides of the street.
I can't confirm if the portrait is that of the first Baron Lamud. I wonder if the town has the exact historical records of the ancient castle. Regardless, the man in the portrait must be a person from the past, at least 1,000 years ago. Besides the hair, he looks almost identical to Mr. Azek. Is this what we call reincarnation? Back when Mr. Azek gave up his position in other universities in Backland and came to Tingen, perhaps it was driven by instinct. There's another possibility, such as the man in the portrait is Mr. Azek and Mr. Azek is him.
Having thought of this, Klein felt a jolt. He nearly stumbled on the steps ahead. He paced back and forth around a damaged gas street lamp and tried to incorporate his knowledge from the world of information overload. According to his earlier guesses, he made a further inference.
Mr. Azek might have become immortal due to some reasons, such as being a vampire. Could that be why he survived for so long? That's not right. When has there ever been a bronze-skinned vampire? Plus, when I shook hands with Mr. Azek, I could clearly feel his body temperature and the fresh blood that flows within him. Although he dislikes the heat of the South, he isn't afraid of the sun. He once competed in a rowing competition with other teachers under the hot sun. There's another possibility. Mr. Azek's sequence potion or some other factors. bestowed him with a long life, and the price for it is memory loss. Man, taking into consideration his various dreams, can I presume that he loses his memory as part of a cycle? Every few decades he forgets his past and gains new life. Then, his dreams are the lives that he has lived before. Heh, I think I've read something like that before in a novel. I can't just rely on divination to verify this. I have to look for the traces of the lives that Mr. Azek lived, traces of him not having a childhood but starting directly as an adult.
Klein started leaning towards his latter guess. However, he temporarily couldn't eliminate the possibility of reincarnation. He reined in his chaotic thoughts and considered carefully whether he should inform Captain Dunn about it.
If Mr. Azek was a beyonder that lived for 1,000 years, his ability would be much stronger than I imagined. He advised me out of kindness. However, it would be hard to say if he will remain kind when I find clues about his past. But Mr. Azek has been nice to me all this time. To involve the Nighthawks would result in a non-trivial possibility of harming him. Sigh. It looks like I must divine this matter in the world above the gray fog. This is the most proper choice for a seer.
Klein made the decision and returned to the hotel quickly. Since Dunn and Fry had yet to return, he seized the opportunity to get another room at the cost of one solely. After he entered the room, Klein made a spirituality wall with the assistance of Holy Night powder. Then he took 4 steps counterclockwise, went through the mad ravings, and arrived above the gray fog. The lofty palace stood tall and silent while the ancient mottled bronze table and 22 high chairs remained the same. Klein took the seat of honor and made a brown goatskin and black fountain pen appear before him. He picked up the pen and wrote seriously.
I should tell Dunn Smith about Mr. Azek.
Then he took the topaz pendant from his left sleeve and did a spirit pendulum divination. The spirit pendulum divination resulted in the pendulum spinning counterclockwise, which meant that he shouldn't tell him. Putting down the topaz pendant, Klein thought about it and decided to make an attempt with dream divination, just to be sure. Thus he changed his divination statement to,
The result of hiding matters related to Mr. Azek from the Nighthawks.
Klein held the goatskin, recited the statement 7 times silently, and leaned backwards to enter a deep sleep. He saw himself in the illusory, blurry, and distant world. He saw that he was struggling while drowning in a sea of blood. Then there was a hand that extended and pulled him up from the blood sea. The owner of the hand was Azek, with bronze skin and a small mole near his ear. The image shattered and reorganized. Klein saw that he was in a dark and gloomy mausoleum. The surrounding coffins opened one after another. Azek stood next to him, looking forward, as though he was looking for something. Just then, Klein exited the dream in an instant and saw the illusory gray and boundless fog.
The symbolic meaning of the earlier dream is that, if I were to hide the related matters about Mr. Azek, I would receive his assistance when I'm in danger in the future. The danger might have come about because I helped to keep the secret. What does the last scene mean? I will discover some mausoleum with Mr. Azek? Yes, perhaps the mausoleum has other symbolic meanings.
Klein clasped his hands together and supported his chin while he interpreted the contents of the dream divination. Combining it with the earlier result of the pendulum divination, he decided to not report his inference to the captain, but merely bring up that a townsfolk had taken out a portrait of the first Baron Lamoud, and that the portrait looked like a history teacher in Coy University. Klein couldn't be sure that Dunn wouldn't hear about it elsewhere, so he had to at least mention it. Of course, Dunn was unfamiliar with Azek and didn't know of his recount and strange dreams, so he would find it difficult to connect them. Klein even suspected that the captain wouldn't quite remember what Azek looked like. Then he stopped thinking further and planned to leave the world above the gray fog. Just then, he noticed the crimson star that had been silent all this time was twinkling with faint light again. Klein extended his spirituality with interest and saw the young man that spoke Jotun again. He saw him kneeling before a pure crystal ball. The young man was still wearing the black tights that were different from the clothing of countries in the northern continent. His facial features were blurry and distorted, but Klein could faintly see his brownish-yellow hair. He knelt there and prayed with an unusual pain in his tone. Klein leaned sideways to hear. He relied on his beginner-level Jotun and barely understood what the young man was saying.
O magnificent deity, please cast your eyes on this land that you have forsaken. O magnificent deity, please allow us, the people of the dark, be freed from the curse of our destiny. I am willing to dedicate my life to you, using my blood to please you.
A land that was forsaken. People of the dark. Magnificent deity. Klein murmured the few key words and suddenly thought of a place that the hanged man had mentioned once. The forsaken land of God.
It appeared in Roselle's diary, too. He even sent out a fleet to search for it, but it was fruitless.
Klein squinted his eyes and wondered if he had guessed correctly. He tapped on the edge of the long bronze table with his fingers. After 3 taps, he came to a decision. He extended his right hand and touched the illusory crimson star. The cloud of crimson immediately exploded, and the light flowed in like water. Chapter 137, City of Silver, Mortuary. Derek stood in front of a flight of stairs as he looked straight ahead with reddened eyes. In front of him were 2 coffins containing his parents. Embedded in a stone plate in front of him was a simple silver sword. The frequent booming of thunder caused the house to shake and the sword to sway. The Berg couple inside the coffins weren't completely dead yet. They struggled to keep their eyes open while making weak attempts to heave for air, but in the eyes of some, the luster of their lives could no longer suppress their irreversible darkening. An elder dressed in a long black robe looked at the youth and said in a deep voice with a staff in his hand,
"Derek, do it."
The expression of the youth was visibly contorted.
No, no, no.
Derek, who had brownish-yellow hair, shook his head repeatedly. He took a step back with every word and finally let out an ear-piercing scream. Thump! The elder struck down his staff and said,
Do you wish for the whole city to be buried along with your parents? You should know that we are the people of the dark who have been forsaken by God. We can only live in a cursed place like this, and all the dead would become horrifying evil spirits. There's no way to reverse it regardless of what we do, other than ending their lives by the hands of a family member.
Why? Why?
Derek asked in despair, shaking his head.
Why are the citizens of the City of Silver destined to kill their parents the moment they are born?
The elder closed his eyes, as if recalling what he had experienced in the past.
This is our destiny, this is the curse we must bear, this is the will of God. Draw your sword, Derek. This is a show of respect for your parents. After this, when you have calmed down, you can try becoming a divine blood warrior.
In the coffin, Berg tried to speak, but he could only let out a groan after his chest heaved several times. Derek took several steps forward with great difficulty. Returning to the side of the silver sword, he extended his shivering right hand. His brain registered the cold touch of the metal, causing him to recall the blood ice his father brought back when he went hunting. Blood ice the size of a mere palm was enough to keep his home cool for a few days. Images flashed past his eyes, his stern father teaching sword techniques, his friendly father patting away the dust on his back, his gentle mother mending his clothes, his brave mother stepping in front of him when they encountered a mutated monster, and finally, his family huddling in front of a flickering candle and sharing food. A faint sound croaked from his throat despite his utmost suppression. With a low grunt, he exerted force with his right hand and drew the sword. Tap, tap, tap! He lowered his head and charged forward, raising the sword and driving it down with force. Ummo! Ah! Blood splattered following a pained scream. The blood splattered onto Derek's face and into his eyes. His vision became red. He pulled out the sword and pierced it into the coffin by the side. After the sharp metal pierced through flesh, Derek released his grip and wavered as he stood up. He didn't look at the condition of the people inside the coffin. Derek stumbled as he ran out of the mortuary, as if he was being chased by evil spirits. His fists and teeth were clenched tight. The blood on his face left streaks across his face. The elder, who had taken in everything from the side, sighed. There were stone pillars that lined the main streets of the City of Silver. Atop the stone pillars were lanterns, and within the lanterns were unlit candles. There was no sun in the sky here, no moon, no stars, only an unchanging darkness and lightning that threatened to tear apart everything. The citizens of the City of Silver walked along the dark streets with the illumination of the lightning. The few hours when the lightning died down was considered by them as the true night, as mentioned in the legends. That was the time where they had to use candles to light up the city, drive away the darkness, and make it serve as a warning for the monsters. Derek made his way along the street. He didn't have anywhere he wanted to go, but as he walked, he realized that he had reached the door of his house. He took out his keys and unlocked the door. He saw the familiar sights, but he didn't hear his mother's concerned voice or his father reprimanding him for running about. The house was empty and cold. Derek clenched his teeth again. He walked quickly to his room and searched for the crystal ball. His father had told him that this was a crystal ball used by a long-destroyed city to worship their deity. He knelt and faced the crystal ball, praying without any hope in mind. He pleaded bitterly,
O magnificent deity, please cast your eyes on this land that you have forsaken. O magnificent deity, please allow us, the people of the dark, be freed from the curse of our destiny. I am willing to dedicate my life to you, using my blood to please you.
Over and over again, just as he was in complete despair and about to stand, he saw a dark red glow burst forth from the pure crystal ball. The glow was like flowing water, instantly swallowing Derek. When he regained his senses, he realized that he was standing in a magnificent palace supported by giant stone pillars. In front of him was a long, ancient table, and on the other side of the table was a human figure obscured by a thick fog. Other than that, there was nothing around him. It was empty and ethereal. Under him was a boundless fog and incorporeal dark red specks of light. Derek felt a flame of hope ignite in his heart. He stared at the human figure at the very top, confused and puzzled.
Are you God?
After asking this, he suddenly remembered a statement he read from a book in the City of Silver and quickly lowered his head. That statement was, "Do not look directly at God." Klein leaned back as he crossed his hands. He adopted a relaxed posture and answered, using the language of the giants, Jotun.
I am not God. I am merely the fool who is interested in the long history of this world.
Klein had already activated his spirit vision by clicking his left molars. He noticed that the youth in front of him had different colors, covering the surface of his astral projection and the depths of his ether body. This meant that he was not a beyonder the fool. Derek ruminated over the term and, after a long silence, said with difficulty,
I don't care if you're God or the fool, my prayers will not change. I hope that the people of the City of Silver will be freed from the curse of their destinies. I hope that the sun and sky described in the books will appear in our skies, if possible. If possible, I wish that my parents can be revived.
Hey, I am not a wishing well.
Klein put down his hands and laughed.
Why should I help you?
Derek froze. He thought for some time before saying,
I will offer my soul to you. I will use my blood to please you.
I have no interest in the soul and blood of a mortal.
Klein smiled and shook his head. He saw the color of the youth's feelings turn into the color of despair bit by bit. Without waiting for the youth to speak, Klein nonchalantly said,
But I can give you a chance. I am a fool that likes a fair and equal exchange. You can use what you can attain to exchange with me, or people like you, to exchange for things you want. But remember, they must be equal in value. This can make you powerful. Perhaps one day, you can rely on your own strength to free the City of Silver from its curse and make the sun appear in your sky once again.
Based on the youth's description, Klein was confident that the City of Silver was the so-called forsaken land of God. Of course, he couldn't be certain of this for the time being. After all, the religious literature claimed that the world existed in a sunless state during the first epoch, the Chaos Epoch. No one knew if there were any other strange lands that the countries of the northern continent were unaware of, other than the forsaken land of God.
Sequence, potion, the sequence pathway that the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun possesses. From the looks of it, we exist in the same world. The term sequence was born from the revelation of the first blasphemy slate, which happened at the end of the second epoch, the Dark Epoch. In other words, if the City of Silver is really the forsaken land of God, this means that it was split apart from the southern and northern continents at the end of the second epoch. Could this be related to the cataclysm of the third epoch? According to the legends, the Evernight Goddess, Earth Mother, and the God of Combat descended upon this world and protected humans from the cataclysm, along with the Lord of Storms, Eternal Blazing Sun, and the God of Knowledge and Wisdom.
Klein obtained a fair bit of information from the youth, but he had trouble interpreting what the youth was saying, and even more trouble organizing his words, as he wasn't fluent in Jotun. Luckily, ancient Fasak was derived directly from Jotun. Klein could be described as an expert in that area, and thus he could master Jotun relatively quickly, preventing him from making a fool of himself. Klein maintained his posture. He replied with a calm tone.
We can discuss this transaction in the future. Do not go out for the next 2 days. Try your best to not be in the same room as anyone else.
He didn't know the unit of time used in the City of Silver, much less the time difference it had with the Lowen Kingdom. All he could do was generalize it as tomorrow and wait until the tarot gathering was over before he told him that was the time for future meetings. Klein knew that there was a term for day in the Jotun, and thus deduced that the youth would understand even if the City of Silver didn't use it as a measure of time.
All right, I'll follow your instructions.
Derek replied with his head lowered. He didn't have any objections. Yeah. Klein heaved a sigh of relief. He tapped his fingers on the side of the table and said,
Before I send you back, let me first complete our equal exchange. I gave you a chance to be strong, and you have to give me something equal in return. I have said that I am the fool who is interested in the long history of this world. What I ask in return is the history of the City of Silver, everything that you know.
Derek thought for a moment before replying softly.
I will describe it faithfully. The City of Silver has existed ever since the omnipotent and omniscient God, the Lord, that created everything forsook this land. No, it existed before that, but it was called the Kingdom of Silver.
Chapter 138, Giant Pathway. The omnipotent and omniscient God, the Lord that created everything. Klein leaned back and maintained a profound posture while he ruminated over the words that the youth from the City of Silver had said. He was no stranger to a Lord that created everything. The Creator mentioned in the Book of Storms, the Revelation of Evernight, and other urban myths referred to the Creator with similar titles. It was also the way various secret organizations, like the Aurora Order, described the true Creator, but this was the first time Klein was hearing of an omnipotent and omniscient God in this world. Be it the Evernight Goddess, Lord of Storms, and the God of Steam and Machinery, none of them claimed to be omniscient or omnipotent. If the City of Silver was really in the forsaken land of God, then the forsaken land of God would truly belong to this world. The omnipotent and omniscient God might be the title of the Creator that was used by the living in ancient times. Klein looked towards the young man opposite him in thought. He looked at the emotional colors of pain and sorrow. When Derek felt the fool's gaze, he lowered his head involuntarily. He recalled the legends that his parents had told him. He said slowly and sadly,
When the sun disappeared from the sky, when the clouds were ripped and torn apart, when lightning and thunder became our rulers and the monsters lurking in the dark suddenly emerged, one so terrifying beyond one's imagination they destroyed one city after another in the Kingdom of Silver. Humanity's dark ages had arrived. The remaining experts in the City of Silver then relied on their united power and 2 magical items before they finally warded off the attack of the things of the dark. They gradually eradicated the monsters within a one-day journey of the city, and they established a city-state that protected the last light of human civilization.
A standard textbook description? Klein couldn't help but comment in his head. The young man's description made him feel that the City of Silver was in a different world than the northern continent.
Maybe this is the unique characteristic of the forsaken land of God?
He thought without revealing his emotions. Derek calmed his breathing and continued.
During the first few decades, plants couldn't grow. The City of Silver had a severe lack of food. and we could only hunt dark creatures or mutated animals to relieve our hunger, the population dropped drastically. Fortunately, we found black-faced grass. It could survive under such circumstances, and it became our only reliable and stable food source. It was said to be the final intervention that the magnificent God left for us. It allowed one generation after another to live on in the City of Silver. It persisted in the Dark Ages for 2,582 years. The passage of time was recorded by a long line of chiefs. For the rest of the people in the City of Silver, we call periods of frequent lightning day, and when the lightning subsides, we call it night. It's a rather confusing system, and it makes exact dates difficult to pinpoint.
Such a magical place. Klein was glad that he hadn't talked about tomorrow, but instead vaguely mentioned the following 2 days. Derek briefly talked about the few memorable incidents in the City of Silver's history and said,
When the population returned to a certain level, the number of Beyonders increased. The 6-member council started forming elite troops to explore the dark. We have now explored all of the original territory and nearby cities. We are advancing towards the darker and more terrifying depths of the dark. At the border, we found cities with strange architectural style, but they were destroyed at some point. We suspect that they were sanctuaries built by other remaining humans. Unfortunately, they still lost to the things of the dark in the end.
The things of the dark that he mentioned should be a reference to monsters that hide in the dark, ones that are beyond imagination. Klein nodded indiscernibly.
The Kingdom of Silver was once ruled by the Giant King. Hence, the Beyonder chain that we are in control of is the Giant Pathway, also known as the Divine Blood Warrior Sequence Pathway. When we killed certain monsters and explored those destroyed cities, we obtained potion formulas of other sequences. However, the sequence pathways are incomplete.
Derek said, moving on to explain the current situation in the City of Silver. Upon hearing that, Klein's mind jolted. Although he didn't change his posture much, he was obviously paying more attention.
I love knowing more about sequence potions. The Giant King. The City of Silver and the Northern Continent share the same history? The Second Epoch's history. Killing a monster causes it to drop a formula? Is this a game? No, there's another possibility. Those monsters were once human, Beyonders.
Klein suddenly felt a heavy weight on his shoulders. Derek saw that the fool didn't reply. He clenched his teeth, pondered, and said,
The names of the Giant Sequence Pathway are Sequence 9, the Beyonder Warrior, Sequence 8, Gladiator, Sequence 7, Weapons Master, Sequence 6, Dawn Paladin, Sequence 5, Guardian, and Sequence 4, Demon Hunter. Only the Elders in the 6-member council know the names of the higher sequences.
Sequence 4, Demon Hunter. This is the name of a high sequence potion formula? This is the first time I've heard something like this.
Klein felt delighted at the fact that he finally learned one of the names of the higher sequences. However, he suspected that it was a name from ancient times, which would be different from the current version in the Northern Continent, just like the Storm Priest and the Seafarer.
Oh, Beyonder Warrior, Gladiator, Weapons Master. Sounds familiar. Oh, right, the sequence pathway that the Church of the God of Combat has in control is very similar to this. Sequence 9 Warrior, Sequence 8 Pugilist, Sequence 7 Weapons Master.
Due to the limits of his security clearance, Klein only knew the titles of the first 3 sequences that the Church of the God of Combat had in control, but the similarity between the 2 pathways was still obvious.
Based on the core meaning, they are basically identical. The complete sequence that the Church of the God of Combat mastered is the so-called Giant Sequence Pathway. It is said that there was a god that emerged in the 3rd epoch, which was the Cataclysm epoch, to inherit the estate of the Giant King? Or could it be that he himself was an ancient giant?
Klein analyzed and judged while he maintained his calm appearance. Derek continued to explain,
After we pulled through the initial hardships, the City of Silver has been ruled by a 6-member council ever since. The elder that enjoys the highest position in the council is called the Chief. The other 5 are equal in rank. The current 6-member council is formed by 3 demon hunters, 2 guardians with the greatest potential, and a shepherd.
The City of Silver has 3 high-sequence Beyonders, demigod-like experts. These 3 alone could destroy the Tarot Club 100 times over.
Klein felt a little afraid. He had yet to attempt recruiting someone under the nose of a high-sequence beyonder. However, since the young man was just a mere commoner, with him not even at sequence 9, it was unlikely that he would gain the attention of the upper echelons for a long time. Thus, Klein relaxed again.
Is Shepard from another sequence pathway, perhaps from one of the incomplete pathways? Sounds reminiscent of the style of the Aurora Order. The member from the Aurora Order that wrote a letter to Mr. Z, what was his name again? He kept mentioning the Lord's Lamb.
Klein maintained his leisurely posture and asked casually,
Shepard?
Yes, this is a sequence pathway that we found from a city that the Things of the Dark destroyed. It only reached sequence 5 Shepard, but Elder Lovia is very strong, very strange, and very scary. It is said that she once won against an evil spirit at the level of a high sequence beyonder without getting injured. Therefore, when there was a vacancy in the 6-member council, they made an exception for her.
Derek, feeling a little fear, Klein thought, then smiled as he asked,
What's the sequences before Shepard? I find them familiar. As you know, a sequence's historical name and its current name is always different.
In the City of Silver, the names of potions have never changed.
Derek refuted instinctively. He then lowered his head and said,
Sequence 9, Secret Suppliant.
Indeed, this is the name of Sequence 9 from the Aurora Order.
Klein was satisfied when his guesses were confirmed.
Sequence 8 is Whispered. Sequence 7, Shadow Ascetic. Sequence 6, Rose Bishop. Sequence 5, Shepherd.
Derek recounted what he knew.
Whispered, listener, they are about the same. Heh, I know more than the information provided by the Tinjin Nighthawks.
In a good mood, Klein beckoned for Derek to continue. Derek then roughly described the current situation of the City of Silver, and finally, he couldn't help but say,
I carry the curse of destiny. Whether a citizen of the City of Silver is a commoner or a beyonder, we all turn into evil spirits after we die. The evil spirit of a beyonder is just stranger, more terrifying, and far more difficult to deal with. In the past, there were many occasions when this curse nearly destroyed the City of Silver. The only way to prevent an evil spirit from rising is for a person to be killed by someone of their own bloodline.
Such a cruel matter. I hope you can grow strong and find a method for the people in the City of Silver to shake off the curse.
Klein, the fool, who was merely an empty shell, could only provide some free chicken soup for the soul.
So I want to be the sun. When there was a sun shining over the land, we had never encountered any curse?
Derek muttered softly with great difficulty and pain. Klein nodded slightly and asked,
You will have the chance to. Remember that I can pull you in here any time in the next 2 days. Try to avoid being around other people.
All right.
Derek replied solemnly,
Before that, I need you to confirm your code name.
Klein smiled and pointed at the deck of tarot cards that appeared on the table. Confident that Derek had never come into contact with tarot cards, he gave a brief introduction.
Pick one of the cards as your code name. Anything besides the Fool, Justice, and the Hanged Man.
Derek took 2 steps forward, flipped through the tarot cards, and said without hesitation,
Sun. I pick the sun.
Remember your choice. It will follow you for the rest of your life.
Klein replied like a charlatan. At the same time, he extended his hand and severed the connection in a restrained manner. Then he watched as the crimson glow receded, and the young man opposite him turned incorporeal and dispersed bit by bit. Chapter 139, Studying 30782. After the crimson light in front of him dissipated, Derek Berg saw his room once again. He saw the pure crystal ball in his hands. Crack! The crystal ball shattered from the inside. Some of it turned into pieces of illusory beams of light that flew into the void around him, while the other crystalline fragments fell noisily to the ground. Derek looked on, dumbfounded. He could see the traces of blood on his face reflected in the bronze mirror. He noticed a crimson light spiraling on the back of his right palm, forming a circle with lines extending out from the edge. The strange symbol bore into the back of his palm and vanished. Derek fell into a daze in the time it took several flashes of lightning to illuminate the sky before snapping to his senses. He looked at the fragments of the crystal ball on the ground, then looked at the back of his right hand as his gaze turned deeper. He walked out of his bedroom, returned to the living room, and opened the door to look up at the sky above the city of Silver. An arc of lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the city with a silver sheen. Right on the heels of that was rumbling thunder. The world belonged to the dark. Without any speck of light, the heavy darkness only left people in despair. Derek clenched his fists. There was no joy in his eyes, for they were still filled with the remnant grief and pain. But he was no longer lost. Klein shook his head and mocked the present strength of his tarot club. He thought,
Phew, looks like I've managed to trick another person into becoming a member. No, I've managed to recruit another member.
the leader, the fool, was only a sequence 9, one who had just fully digested the seer potion. And there were at least 3 high-sequence beyonders at sequence 4 in the hopeless city of Silver that the sun spoke of. Klein didn't stay in the world of fog. He extended his spirituality, wrapped it around himself, and initiated a descent. He thought,
After mentioning the acting method one more time, I can start telling the captain the specifics and hand in my special application. At the very least, I'll stop being in charge of support once I become a clown.
Tearing through the gray fog and passing through the ravings, he returned to his room before dispelling the wall of spirituality. Then, Klein picked up the key and headed out of the room. He first went to the 2 rooms booked by Dunn to take a look, in order to confirm that the captain and Fry hadn't returned yet. He then headed to the first level and handed the key back to the boss. The boss looked at the wall clock to the side and gave a thumbs up.
Well done.
Klein wanted to explain himself, but finally decided to leave the misunderstanding as it was. He thought,
Hey, are you mistaken over why I booked an hourly room?
Feeling wronged, he tried to console himself. He thought,
Yes, this way he won't mention that I rented another room in front of the captain.
After heading out and going through the motions, Klein did a quick divination and returned to the inn based on the results. He headed straight to the second floor to find Dunn and Fry discussing their investigations in one of the rooms, just as he expected. Dunn summarized to Klein with a nod as he came through the door.
We can confirm that the Wraith appeared within the last 3 months.
Klein immediately echoed.
My investigations also confirmed it.
He highlighted the main points of his questioning and concluded,
There's a townsfolk named Scoundrel Gray who claimed that he had the portrait of the first Baron Lamud. He said that it was an antique oil painting more than 1,000 years old.
Dunn's eyes shimmered as he was taken aback before he asked.
Don't tell me you bought it?
Klein gave a dry laugh. He thought,
Captain, do you think that I'm so stupid to be fooled that easily? No, I didn't. Even though I'm a history student, I have attended some lessons on archaeology and have some degree of experience in this area. I can more or less determine if something is fake. The person in the portrait looked a little like my history teacher, Mr. Isaac.
He casually mentioned the most important piece of information, and indeed Dunn didn't pay too much attention to it. He massaged his temples and said,
This is a small town near a historical site. There will always be a myriad of antiques here. I just saw a vendor selling the silver wine glasses of Baron Lamud.
Fry added,
Someone tried to sell me the insignia of the Lamud family, claiming that it had been dug out of the castle.
Klein subconsciously asked.
Did you guys buy them?
Fry and Klein looked at each other and didn't continue with the subject. Dunn looked at Klein with his deep gray eyes.
The next mission is for you or Fry to take sealed artifact 30782 out of town to somewhere uninhabited. Otherwise, a good half of the people in this inn will become idiots blathering praises of the sun. Are you going first or Fry?
Klein raised his hand slightly and smiled.
Me. It's still quite early, so I can come back and have a nice sleep later. We're doing 2-hour shifts, right?
Dunn turned to look at corpse collector Fry.
Yes. Fry, go over with Klein and confirm where you'll exchange the sealed artifact.
He had already found an opportunity to hand sealed artifact 30782 over to Fry when they split up to conduct their investigations. Otherwise, he would have been purified and started praising the sun Fry hadn't had enough time to recover and could only hold the item for another 3 hours. Fry took out the mutated sun sacred emblem from the inner pocket of his black trench coat and handed it over to Klein.
All right.
Klein took the item with a fair bit of curiosity and interest. The metal was warm to the touch, as if hot water was flowing within it. The warm, gentle glow was like a ripple, spreading outward in waves and bringing with it a pure smell. At the same time, Klein felt that the dark, golden, sacred emblem, carved with the symbol of the sun, was cleansing his spirituality, removing the impurities and leaving it pure. He muttered to himself as he placed the sealed artifact 30782 into his inner pocket. He thought,
Of course, all sealed artifacts have their dangers. Death might occur if one isn't careful enough. It's even possible to have a fate worse than death.
After inspecting his revolver, charms, and cane, he walked out of the room and left the inn together with Fry. They headed straight for the outskirts of Lamood town. The two circled an area beside a sparse and deserted forest and confirmed that there was no one within dozens of meters of them. Shoru, Fry coldly reminded.
Chase away anyone who approaches you. I'll come to take your place in 2 hours.
Klein replied with a smile.
Sounds good.
After seeing Fry enter the town, he found a tall boulder he had eyed previously. He picked up some leaves from the tree beside him and wiped the surface of the boulder. He then touched the top of the stone with his finger and inspected the stone under the light of the crimson moon. After confirming that it was clean, Klein put on his black trench coat and sat down. Cheris. Klein thought to himself,
Why stand when you can sit?
After a few minutes of silence, he looked at the dark, quiet, and rather scary forest. He couldn't help but stand up, taking out several metal bottles from his hidden pockets and scattering their contents, herb powder and essential oils, around the boulder. Klein recited an incantation in Hermes. With the help of the materials, he created a barrier of spirituality, sealing the area he was in. He did this simple ritual for 2 reasons. First, he didn't want to rely too much on his premonition for danger as a seer to defend against corpses and spirits launching a sneak attack against him. The second reason was to keep the bugs away. Klein sat back down, satisfied. He thought,
This is 100 times better than insect repellent.
After sitting there for a few minutes, Klein took out sealed artifact 30782 out of curiosity. He began a detailed inspection of the mutated sun sacred emblem. He took out the pen and paper he always had on him and wrote a statement, "The origin of the mutated sun sacred emblem in my hands." He thought,
I wonder if I could use divination to find out its origins and how it became special.
As a qualified and true seer, Klein had made the preparations needed to divine anywhere. After reciting the statement 7 times, he closed his eyes and entered a state of cogitation, using that as a launch pad to propel him into his dreams. All he saw were fragmented pieces of light in his dreams. Other than that, he didn't learn anything else. Klein sighed. He then thought,
Yes, the church must have gotten other seers to attempt the same thing in the past. The fact that there is no mention of its origins must mean that there was no result from the divination, just like what happened just now. I wonder what would happen if I eliminate the interferences.
This thought immediately filled Klein's head, pushing his curiosity to a peak. After more than 10 minutes of hesitation, he stood up. He decided that it was fine since there was no one around, considering how he was in a secluded area of the forest. He took 4 steps counterclockwise inside his wall of spirituality before entering the world above the fog once again. Klein sat at the seat of honor of the ancient table in the magnificent palace. He conjured a few sheets of yellowish-brown goatskin and a black fountain pen, as well as the mutated sun sacred emblem. He He rubbed sealed artifact 30782 in his hands, finding the tactile feedback identical to the one he had felt in the outside world. He thought,
It feels rather real.
Klein mumbled to himself before writing down the statement he had come up with previously.
It instantiates itself based on what I felt?
The origin of the mutated sun's sacred emblem in my hands. After reciting the statement 7 times, he held the piece of goatskin and sealed artifact, 30782, in his hands. He leaned back and entered his dream. In the blurry dream world, Klein saw a drop of glowing gold liquid. It was warm and bright. It was suspended above an altar, before a man dressed in a white classic robe. The man only had his back facing Klein. He had lost all signs of life as he fell slowly towards the sacrificial altar. At that moment, the sun-sacred emblem he was holding had come into contact with the golden liquid, the latter quickly seeping into the emblem. The dream quickly dissipated after Klein saw this, waking him up. Klein toyed with the sealed artifact 30782 in his hand and slipped into deep thought. He thought,
So it was because of the golden liquid that this sacred emblem has been so effective and uncontrollable to this day. Decades have passed since the discovery of this emblem, but its cleansing powers haven't declined. I wonder what that golden liquid was. Some advanced Beyonder ingredient?
After deliberating over it for a few minutes, he tried to emulate the feeling he had in the dream. He wanted to separate the golden liquid from the mutated sun's sacred emblem he had conjured. He accomplished it almost immediately as the thought came to him. Klein looked in shock at the emblem, which was no longer warm or pure. He watched as the drops of golden liquid silently suspended themselves in the air. He had even more praises for this mysterious space above the fog.
This is practically a miracle, even if the separation and instantiation here isn't real.
He penned down a new statement with great excitement.
The origins of this drop of golden liquid.
Chapter 140. Expert at Courting Death. The origins of this drop of golden liquid. After reciting the divination statement 7 times, Klein held onto the goatskin and the illusory golden liquid before leaning back in his seat. He did not know if he could divine with the item that was instantiated based purely on a feeling. All he could do was make bold assumptions and carefully seek confirmation. In seconds, Klein's eyes darkened, turning from brown to black as he entered a state of cogitation. His eyelids drooped down and he saw the illusory yet blurry dream. In the blurry world that looked in shambles, a golden, glaring sun suddenly appeared. A low grunt resounded across the void. The pure and clean light suddenly lit everything up as the gold and burning flames swept outwards. Boom! Klein was instantly expelled from his dream world and flipped onto his side as he shivered. His body seemed to become a huge bonfire which burned with a raging flame. At that moment, his thoughts were all over the place. No proper idea could form from the chaos in his mind. Rumble! The mysterious space above the gray fog shook violently, and the lofty palace collapsed inch by inch. The ancient, mottled bronze table broke into a few pieces. The terrifying changes only continued for 3 seconds before the world above the gray fog returned to tranquility, as though nothing had happened. The gold flame on Klein gradually extinguished. He rolled around on his charred skin as he groaned in pain until he eventually regained his ability to think. He supported himself on the armrest of the high chair and stood up with great difficulty. He was terrified and confused about what had just happened. He had never imagined that a mere divination would result in such consequences. He panted and lifted his head to survey his surroundings. He realized that the lofty palace and ancient bronze table, which looked like they had stood unchanged since ancient times, had been damaged. In the world above the gray fog, which had never experienced any abnormality, it was simply an unprecedented level of damage. Klein calmed down slightly and let his burned flesh shed while he speculated.
What happened? Did my divination point towards some unfathomable existence? If I was not protected by this mysterious space above the gray fog, there might not even be ashes of me left behind. Could that drop of gold liquid be the blood of a god? Did I see the eternal blazing sun, or some powerful angel of his? No, that was the sun, so I think it was the former. Damn, did I just look directly at a god?
Klein felt more fear as he thought about it. He felt that he had nearly died.
Those who know nothing fear nothing, but those who do not court death will not die. In the future, I cannot just divine anything and everything. Who knows what I will see? If that were to happen once more, I do not know if this mysterious space could even shelter me from fatal damage. When that happens, I would actually die. Yes, it definitely will not do if I continue making experiments with the golden liquid. The existence from before which was likely eternal blazing sun, he must have sensed the sudden, hidden, and unexpected influence from the divination above the gray fog and failed to respond in time. If he were prepared, this mysterious space might not have been able to withstand the repercussions.
Having come to this realization, Klein's body had already returned to normal. It was no longer charred, but compared to before, he was dimmer and more incorporeal than before. He lifted his hand to massage his temples and commanded with his mind to restore the palace and the long table. Then, the palace that looked like the home of a giant and the long table cast out of bronze returned to normal. Everything looked like it had before. Klein sat down and leaned against the back of the chair. He engaged in self-mockery.
Well, this is not entirely bad. At least I know the limit of the mysterious space, and I have a certain goal. Only powers approaching the angels of the gods can completely influence the power of the area above the gray fog. Sigh. I have to add another new rule to my seer principles. Do not randomly divine things that involve a high-level entity. Yes, I should not hastily activate my spirit vision either. If I were to look directly at things that should not be looked at directly, it might be game over. In the outside world, I do not have the mysterious space to fend off most of the negative effects.
After a while, Klein's expression turned odd because some knowledge was reverberating in his head. Yes, knowledge! In the short time he had spent with what appeared to be eternal blazing sun, Klein was constantly in his divination state. Hence, he could instinctively divine certain matters and knowledge from the being that he was looking at. He quickly used a dream divination to recall and organize what he had gathered that was not his primary objective. He picked up the black fountain pen and wrote one line after another. 1. Do not look directly at God. 2. White angel. 3. The technique of making a flaring sun charm. It is a relatively high-level charm in the domain of the sun. Its potency can last a year before it deteriorates. There is no need for a ritual to pray to the eternal blazing sun, but the procedure requires the sealed artifact 3-0782 to take the ritual's place. It will siphon power from the mutated sun sacred emblem. 4. Extremely hostile towards Lord of Storms and God of Knowledge and Wisdom. 5. Bard Potion Formula. Main ingredients: a crystal sunflower or an adult flint bird's tail feather or a firebird's tail feather, a piece of siren rock or a singing sunflower. Supplementary ingredients: a blade of midsummer grass, 5 drops of July wine juice, a blade of elf dark leaf. 6. Light Suppliant Potion Formula. Main ingredients: a piece of brilliance rock or powder of dazzling soul ore, blood of a mirror hedgehog or the heart of a magma titan. Supplementary ingredients: a golden-edged sunflower, 3 drops of aconite juice. 7. Priest of Light Potion Formula. Information of main ingredients missing. Supplementary ingredients: 5 grams of rosemary, 7 drops of fingered citron juices, rock water. 8. Sequence 4. Unshadowed Potion Formula. Main ingredients could be the golden blood of God extracted from the mutated sun's sacred emblem. It could also be replaced with 3 adult sun divine birds' tail feathers and a piece of holy brilliance rock. Information of supplementary ingredients missing. After writing down the 8 lines, Klein could not help but rap the edge of the long bronze table.
He had gained way more than he imagined.
He was already satisfied with surviving his reckless divination earlier, but now he had received an unexpected survival reward. From the confidential information he received from the Nighthawks, he knew that the sequence pathway that the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun held was called Sun, and its sequence 9 was Bard. It would allow the Beyonder to imbue courage and strength for themselves and their allies through their singing, a job that brought about devotion and submission. Their slogan was, "Let us praise the sun." The corresponding sequence 8 was light suppliant. They could cast spells and hold rituals from the sun's domain, which were very effective against corpses and spirits. Sequence 7 was called Solar High Priest, which greatly enhanced the spells and rituals within its domain.
In other words, I have obtained the complete potion formulas of Sequence 9 and Sequence 8 in the Sun sequence pathway. Yes, unlike before, the potion formula even lists replacement items and ingredient names from different eras, as expected of formulas obtained directly from eternal blazing sun through divination.
He had originally planned on seeing if the hanged man could solve the request of the young man from the City of Silver. After all, the Church of Storms and the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun were the most ancient Orthodox sects. They had fought against each other for thousands of years, so it would only make sense for the two churches to have learned the initial sequence of each other's pathways. The hanged man might not have cared about the sun pathway previously, but since he is very likely a Sequence 7 seafarer, it would probably be easy for him if he really needed to gather the information.
However, I do not need him now. I solved it myself, through an unbelievable yet extremely dangerous method. Miss Justice, Mr. Hanged Man, my sun friend, your fool nearly turned himself into a charred corpse.
Klein lampooned silently while still feeling a lingering sense of fear. My! He lowered his head and looked at the records on the goatskin before him. He thought of another formula.
Would the Priest of Light be an ancient name of Solar High Priest? The confidential information of the Nighthawks never mentioned it, and my divination did not pinpoint the sequence number. Is it Sequence 6 or Sequence 5? Sequence 4, Unshadowed. This is the first high sequence formula that I have obtained. It is such a pity that it lacks the supplementary ingredients. I wonder how I can fill in the blanks. I cannot believe that drop of golden liquid is really the blood of a god. Sealed Artifact 3-0782 is probably far stronger than anyone imagines. From what I can see, it is sufficient to become a Grade 1 sealed artifact. Yes, it is likely that the Nighthawks from before only determined whether the item has any traits of the living, how much danger it would cause to nearby humans, how difficult it is to control the item's effects, and if it can be used against corpses and spirits. They had no way of discovering its unique origin. The mutated sun sacred emblem can probably even fight against evil spirits. How could the examiner find an evil spirit to experiment on? As an official Nighthawk, I cannot become the owner of Sealed Artifact 3-0782, but yes, I can find an opportunity to make a flaring sun charm and siphon its power? Sigh. I certainly cannot do it now. I have not prepared the necessary ingredients. Why would I, a Nighthawk of the Evernight Goddess, carry the ingredients of the sun around with me?
Klein massaged his forehead regrettably. He saw that there was no other movement in the world above the gray fog, and finally relaxed. He confirmed that the eternal blazing sun had not managed to track him down.
Do not look directly at God. Do not look directly at a high-level entity. I must remember this. Why would the eternal blazing sun be extremely hostile towards the Lord of Storms and the God of Knowledge and Wisdom? What the hell is a white angel?
As these mixed thoughts filled his brain, Klein felt the emptiness and an aching pain in his head. Plus, he felt that too much time had passed. He had to return to the outer world, just in case someone discovered anything amiss. Back then, he thought it would take a minute or so to divine 2 or 3 times in the mysterious space. Plus, there was a spirituality wall isolating him from everything else. Once it was touched, his body in the world above the gray fog would sense it. Hence, he felt utterly safe, but he had not considered the possibility of having some sort of accident. In the end, he nearly lost his life, and that wasted quite a bit of time. Due to the fact that he was afraid that he would be greeted by a light of purification beam or discover that the mutated sun sacred emblem was damaged, he enveloped his body with spirituality before he stimulated a descent with his heart in his mouth. The crimson moonlight reflected in his eyes, and there was a darkness hidden within. Klein saw the sparse forest and the weeds before him, as well as the intact sealed Artifact 3-0782 in his hands. After a few seconds of breathless anxiety, he finally believed that he was safe. Putoo! Putoo! Klein let out a breath of relief. He felt exhausted after his insane probing at the border of death.